If you've ever cropped your photos, then you need to watch this because you could be ruining your photos permanently. I'll share what I learned about cropping photos that I wish I would have learned sooner so that you can stop ruining your own photos. And be sure to stick around to the end because I'm going to be showing you a Lightroom hack for a hidden crop tool that you can use. First, let's tackle the million-dollar question when it comes to cropping photos, and that is, does cropping actually reduce resolution in your photos? Pretty much, yes. Anytime you put a photo on your editing software and then you crop it down, what you're basically doing is saying goodbye to those image pixels that are making up the photo. Think of your photo as a house. Now, you want your house to stand on a firm foundation, but cropping your photos is actually chiseling away at some of the resolution and the pixels that are available in your photo, and chiseling away at that foundation reduces the resolution and can actually ruin a photo. Not to mention the house is going to crumble with no foundation. Now, it doesn't happen with every single crop. Obviously, the size of the crop matters a lot here. So the larger crop that you use, the more you're removing from that resolution and the weaker resolution in your image file that you're going to have. The smaller crops are fine because they're only getting rid of a tiny bit of that resolution on the edges, and it's not that big of a deal. You can still create large photos. And I'll get to more about large photos in just a minute. Just remember that significantly cropping an image actually reduces the image clarity and destroys a photo. Cropping your photo also alters the composition altogether. When you think about composition, you want to be sure that you get the exact photo that you want when you're shooting in the field. Now, there are lots of little variations you can make to a composition, and you can definitely take a photo with a little bit of wiggle room. Sometimes, if I'm not sure about a composition, I will zoom out just a little bit to take a photo knowing that I can barely crop it in later in post-processing. But I'm never going to take a photo that is horizontal that I know that I'm going to crop into a vertical photo later. That wouldn't make sense because you're removing so much of the image file and losing a ton of resolution in the process, making that photo pretty much unusable. So here's a tip about composition and getting right in the field. Take multiple photos at each of your locations. When you're taking these photos, be sure to check that composition after you take a photo and decide what my subject is, what's attracting me to my subject, and then what's distracting me from the subject. When you're looking at the subject, increase or amplify the things that are attracting you to the subject and play around with those in the composition. Then decide what's distracting you from the subject and remove those items out of the composition. This will allow you to get really fine-tuned photos with the best composition possible and keep all of your resolution in your files because you won't have to crop later. Now, we just talked a lot about composition, and in a few seconds I'm going to be sharing more tips on cropping and showing you that hidden Lightroom trick. But first I want to tell you about LPU Plus. Composition is huge, and with LPU Plus, the first landscape photography only streaming platform for landscape photography courses, we cover over 8 hours of information on composition for your landscape photography. And with LPU Plus, you can stream the other courses outside of composition too that help you to take the best photos of your life for under the price of a fancy coffee. You can now stream multiple courses all for under $11. I'll put that link in the video description for you to check out, and you can start learning right now. So we talked about how cropping too much eliminates a lot of that image resolution and chisels away at that foundation of your photo. This causes problems when you're printing your own photos too, because now what's happening is you can't enlarge your photos any more than the image file size. The larger photos need a lot of resolution, and cameras now with something like 50 megapixel sensors can actually create very large prints. Cropping down too much eliminates all the money that you spent on that high megapixel sensor, and you won't be able to print those large photos that you want to hang on walls. Even if you're not too into printing and you don't want to create huge image files, your resolution is going to be very small on even the smallest image files that you may print. So cropping too much is always a bad idea. Let's look at that secret Lightroom tool. If you go to crop, you can see that the standard crop window comes up here. Now, this is a waterfall shot that I took in the fall, and I want to fine tune this crop and the composition here. So what I'm going to do is use this crop window that comes up and the rule of thirds grid, and it all lines up pretty good. Now, what you don't know is that you can actually hit the O key on your keyboard and different crops come up. So now we have a grid here where I can look at, am I filling every little square with some detail around my subject? Is there a lot of interest level going on? Am I leaving too much negative space in all of these windows? That is the question that you want to answer with this one. Now, if you hit the O key again, now you have a different crop tool coming up. What happens with this one though, is that you can see, am I creating a lot of variation of lines coming in to the main subject? Is that main subject in the intersecting parts of these lines, so around this diamond that's in the center of the photo? Keep hitting that O key and you're gonna get different crops that come up here. So this one, you look at different quadrants of the photo. Is the photo balanced? If you hit that O key again, you can see different lines that you can use for the crop and follow those into the photo. So if your lines aren't perfectly lining up with some of these, you can then crop in just slightly to make those line up better and fine tune that composition. Just tweak it a little bit. You can keep hitting that and look at something like the 16:9 and then the Fibonacci ratio or the golden mean in this as well. These are great tools for you to use in Lightroom because if you are looking to crop or just barely fine tune that composition, you can use these to be sure that all those features and subjects are still lining up with those tools. Speaking of Lightroom tools, here's a video that's going to help you with a lot of the secret tools that you may not know about.